Hello and welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host Sharon, and today I'm sporting our Bride of the Mummy t-shirt design, which is available on Zazzle. Check it out. If you tuned in last month for our Halloween episode, that was when we did the unveiling for that. And I put the t-shirts on Zazzle and not Patreon because I wanted to make sure I gave you guys, my viewers, the best deal on it. So be sure to go and check it out. And it's Zazzle, it's getting close to the holidays, they're running lots of sales. So now would be a great opportunity to treat yourself to something. With that product placement out of the way, today we're going to do some more book reviews. And actually I have quite a few of those planned. We're going to break them up, and today we're going to talk about two books. The first one is Isis, Great of Magic, She of 10,000 Names by Olivia Church. This book was actually a gift from one of our viewers, Marie Rimmer. Thank you so much. She was so kind not only to send the book but also to send a card. So it's always a real treat when viewers send me things, and you folks are so thoughtful, and I love you for it. Thank you so much, and I looked forward to reviewing this book. I have to say, I really like this one, and I'll give you several reasons why. I would say this is a very reliable introduction to the goddess Isis, aka Aset, and she points that out. Now a global goddess, but, gives a very good introduction to her and her historical background as an Egyptian goddess. And she writes in language that's very easy to understand, and the author actually has a master's in Egyptology. And, as I'm reading it, her stuff checks out. And another thing that I really, really like about this book is that she actually has something to say. And it may seem like kind of a no-brainer, but really it's not. And I'll get into, the contrast with that in the next book. But when you're writing, if you have an overall point, something that you're trying to get across, then you can actually follow with it and read it, and it's not just like reading a book report. And I can also say, if you want to know more about the goddess Isis, aka Aset, this book is a much better introduction and much shorter than an older book called Mysteries of Isis by de Tracy Regula. About 12 years ago, I read Mysteries of Isis. It's that thick, double-columned, and Mysteries of Isis, had a lot of information in there that was unsupported and kind of a leap and, stuff. So I would have to say, get this, not that. Now, about the points that our author here, for Isis, Great of Magic, She of 10,000 Names, has to make. The first one is that, aside from the role that everybody knows of Isis as the mother goddess, the mother of Horus, just as important is her role as Great of Magic. And the author contends that if you are a practicing pagan, then Isis would be a great goddess to work with in magic, in Hika. And she could be a witch's ally, if you will, much as the goddess Hecate is for Hellenic pagans and, more, Wiccan and eclectic witches. And she talks about myths involving the goddess Isis, and she, supports her point using, historical sources. Another thing that I like about this book is that the author has actually visited Egypt. Some of the photos in here are her own photos, and she also describes a little bit when she talks about ancient sites and what it was like visiting them. And so what places, are exposed to sunlight that, in ancient times would not have been, and, what it was like going to the island of, well, originally Philae. They moved the temple to Isis to a different island, and she talks about that. So it's obvious that she's been there, and she relates a little bit about it, which is cool. And, to date, I'm not able to do that yet. I'd love to go one day, but, a lot of things have to be different for that to happen. Another point that this author makes that I very much agree with, and I'm glad that she pointed this out, is that personal religion in ancient Egypt took a different scope from the state religion, being the rites and, the rituals that were performed in the big temples. And, that's something that I think a lot of people miss, because most of what we have, is the preserved texts from temples and from papyri. We don't have any, written records anyway of what the average person did. But what we do today as Egyptian pagans probably is more reflective of what the ordinary ancient Egyptians would have done. And I'm glad that she points that out, because that's very important, I think, to understand, especially if you're trying to go Kemetic reconstruction. You have to keep in mind, we've got all of these temple records here, the hymns and the daily ritual to Amun, in Thebes, and of Amenophis, the first, and so on. But really, how many of us have the space to actually do some of the things that the original records called for? And that's something that I'd like to talk about in a later video. But it's nice to have another author point this out and basically say, look, don't sweat it if your altar is small. That's okay. A lot of real ancient Egyptians that lived, under real pharaohs had altar spaces that were probably not much more, involved than what you have. So, take comfort in the common thread there. The quibbles that I have about this book are really very minor, other than, a few typos in there. It's common. She connects the rise of the star Sirius, as the Egyptians knew it, Sopdet, with the birth of Isis. Not quite. The rising of Sirius before dawn was supposed to mark Egyptian New Year's. But here's the thing. That only fell in sync between, when it actually happened and what the recorded calendar date said, every 1400 some odd years. So when it wasn't in sync, it wouldn't have necessarily fallen on the day. And 8 years before that time that the calendar was in sync, Sirius would have risen on the birth date of Aset. So I can't really falter, for saying that. It's just I felt it necessary to clarify it. Now, the other quibble that I have is that she cites sources which state the role of Set as the murderer of Osiris came about during the Middle Kingdom. I hear that a lot, and I have evidence to counter that, because there are spells in the pyramid texts that point to Set as, the killer of Osiris, and the pyramid texts are much earlier than the Middle Kingdom. And there's a couple of them that I can read for you here. There's one where Set is actually trying to defend himself for what he did, in a sense. So, just so you know, the translation that I use is the Ancient Egyptian Pyramid Texts by James P. Allen. It was produced or published in 2005. Most people refer to the translation by Raymond Faulkner, which is, a few decades earlier. The gist of it is still the same. It's just James Allen translates a few things differently, and he rearranged the order of them to reflect the order that the spells were to be read in the tomb part of the pyramids of the 5th dynasty and 6th dynasty kings. And other than that, he provides a concordance. So if you see something here, like this is the spell of Pepi the First, number 327, there's a concordance in the back so you can find out which of the pyramid texts, as it was numbered by previous authors, would have been. So here we have, the sky has become disheveled, the earth has trembled. Horus has come. Thoth has appeared, that they might raise Osiris from off his side, and make him stand up in the duel Anead. Remember, Set, and put in your heart this speech that Geb has said, this curse that the gods have made against you in the officials' enclosure in Heliopolis, because you threw Osiris to the earth. And you have to keep in mind that is a pun, because one of the places where Osiris was said to have been killed was a town that the name Nedit, it sounded like the name for, the word for to cast down. When you said, Set, in fact, he has been attacking me, and his identity of Earth Attacker came into being. When you said, Set, in fact, he has been kicking me, and his identity of Orion came into being, wide of foot, spread of stride, and foremost of the Nile Valley land. So in other words, you have Set trying to say, well, he did all of these things to me. It wasn't, me that did it first. And in the process of saying these things, it created names and titles that, were used for Osiris. Because remember, Osiris is identified with Orion, the constellation. So, there's a joke between kicking and then Osiris as Orion, the strider. So that's one spell. Here's another one. And we can presume that the speaker in this spell would be acting as Horus or as the son of the dead king, in this case Pepi the First. Father Striker, killer of one greater than you. You have struck my father. You have killed one greater than you. Father Osiris, Pepi, I have struck for you as an ox, the one who struck you. I have killed for you as a wild bull, the one who killed you. I have broken down for you as a long-horned bull, the one who broke you down. The one on whose back you were is a bull on his back. The one who stretched you out is a bull on the rack. The one who milked you is a milked bull. The one who deafened you is a herd bull. And then it goes on to identify him. Just in case you might be thinking, well, it didn't say Set. Well, at the end it says, the one to be eaten, the red ox, is for the lake journey that Horus has made for his father, this Osiris Pepi. And there's another part of the text that actually kind of mirrors one of the rituals in the Triumph of Horus at Edfu, which is much later in date and very much identifies Set. So you have the origins of it right here in the pyramid texts. So it's erroneous to say that it wasn't until the Middle Kingdom that people started saying, well, Set was the one who murdered Osiris. That was a tradition that was beginning already in the late Old Kingdom. And so that's not a quibble against this author, but rather against her sources, which in this case would be Hart's Routledge Dictionary of Egyptian Gods and Goddesses. But overall, this is actually a very good book. I give it my stamp of approval. And if you are interested in learning more about the goddess Isis, it's worth picking up. And again, it's a short read. If you're an avid reader like me, you could probably get through it in an evening and enjoy it and not mind picking it up again later. So, there you go. See, I can be kind to books, if they earn it. But my next book, this book is Sekhmet and Bastet, Feline Powers of Egypt by Leslie Jackson. You know what? I couldn't finish this book. I tried. I really tried. Because, I am a follower of Sekhmet, and so I was interested to learn more about this. But, as I was saying earlier, a book is easier to read when the author has something to say. They're trying to present a point and line up everything in order to support, or refute, a particular point. This author just wanted to talk about cats and Egyptian goddesses. Really, came across as an author who loves cats and wants to talk about cats and is looking for cats in Egyptian mythology, not someone who is a scholar of Egyptian mythology and religion looking for feline elements in the Egyptian religion. It may not seem like much of a difference, but it really is when you start to get down into the details and, you know, what she's saying, how does she structure it, and what things she ultimately ends up missing in the process. For one, she suggests that the origin of domestic cats is in Egypt. And for a long time that's what people thought, was the Egyptians were the first to domesticate cats. But since 2000, there have been not only archaeological finds, but also as our computing power has increased and we've been able to map not only the human genome but also the genomes of other animals, we're starting to do DNA studies and learn more about evolution and which animals are related and which animals aren't, and finding some surprising things. You know, that's like the Egyptian wolf is related to the gray wolf. And so for those of you that, you know, follow Wepwawet, or Upwot, you know, that wolf identification is pretty strong. Back on the feline side, we have found out that yes, the African wildcat Felis sylvestris libica was probably the, you know, ancestor of all cats, but they have found evidence of domesticated cats. There was a woman and her cat. Their skeletons were found in Cyprus, an island in the Mediterranean, that was older than any evidence we have in Egypt right now. And we think that cats aren't native to Cyprus, so this must have been a domestic cat that traveled with people who inhabited, you know, who settled the island. And so, you know, this is something that was very recently found. It was in 2004. And the reason why I'm asking why our author didn't, you know, think to look for that is because she has other things in her bibliography that are very recent. You know, as a matter of fact, that is really the best thing about her book, is her bibliography. I found out some things had been reprinted by looking in that, and so it's more of a resource to me that way than anything she talks about in the main body of the book. As she goes on, she does have a lot of information that she puts out, but sometimes it almost seems like shotgunning. Oh, well, there's a depiction of a cat here, or a depiction of, you know, a lioness here, or da-da-da. And she's looking for specifically feline deities. And that's kind of pigeonholing gods and goddesses into very, very narrow categories, when there was more to them than just, you know, did they have, you know, a cat form or a lion form, you know, or some other kind of feline or feline-ish, you know, animal form. And she has a section where she mentions Eye of Ra goddesses who did not have a feline form, but she never even mentions Neat. Neat could also act as Eye of Ra, and she didn't take on a feline form. Oops. Also, she mentions Tutu, and describes him as a deity that arose in the Ptolemaic period, and was more of a Greek influence. And no. Now, you have to go on Google Books in order to find a work that was published. There was a study specifically of Tutu, but the author there traces his origins all the way back to the late New Kingdom, and theorizes that Tutu evolved out of the veneration of sphinxes identifying particular pharaohs, which had gotten to be old by a certain point, and you know, people may not have remembered who Amenhotep III or Ramesses the Great was, but they see all these sphinxes, and those sphinxes took on the form of Tutu. And by the way, about sphinxes, I didn't find any mention of them in here. Was it just towards the back and the points that I didn't get to because I was so mentally exhausted? I don't know, but if you're going to talk about feline deities, why are we not talking about the ones that take on a sphinx form and the lion aspect? Why don't we talk about Hore-Maket, Horus in the Horizon, which was the deity that became associated with the Great Sphinx in front of the Great Pyramids at Giza. I don't know. Ultimately, she makes some assertions about the roles that certain deities played in popular worship that she really can't support. And in some cases, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. For example, she states that the goddess Tefnut was probably unimportant to ordinary people. Well, never mind the fact that Tefnut gets invoked in lustration rituals. These cool waters purify me as Tefnut purifies me. Yes, that's from temple texts, but that sort of thing was probably known even among ordinary people. And also, Tefnut is invoked in certain rituals that protect Osiris, including Papyrus Salt 825. And Tefnut is sometimes one of 4 goddesses named in spells using little clay cobra figurines that were meant to protect the 4 corners of a house in ordinary settlements. So, we have evidence that even goddesses like Tefnut had some kind of involvement for ordinary people somewhere in the country. As for Bast, or Bastet, the author claims that Bastet, as she does correctly point out, that Bastet started out as a lioness-headed goddess, just like Sekhmet and Tefnut and many others, but eventually took on the form of a domestic cat. The author claims that it was because that was more familiar to ordinary people as opposed to the royal lion, and so the worship of Bast by ordinary people led to the cat form. Well, you don't have any evidence to support that one way or another. What about Ra as the great tomcat? That was something that was presented in royal literature and in ordinary literature, so, I don't know. The other thing that she contends is that Bastet, as the house cat, is the gentler aspect of Sekhmet, the fierce one, the lioness. Now, there are some Kemetic pagans, especially Kemetic reconstructionists and others, that really, that's like a sticking point for them is, no, Bast and Sekhmet have nothing to do with each other. Well, they did sometimes get invoked side by side, especially in the late period, but I do kind of take their side in that, no, Bast is not just a gentler side of Sekhmet. And there are even things that the author herself mentions that militate against that. Remember, plagues were seen as the hot rage of Bastet. Bastet could control the arrow demons too. Bastet, even in later times, still had a very fierce aspect. She was still an Eye of Ra. It's just that she, had identification with cats. Remember, the cats were, probably seen as doing, the sun god's work. If you watched cats, attack and kill snakes, among other things. And one of our friends, their cats are always attacking snakes in the yard. And what was funny for me, since we're talking about cats, at one time my brother had a girlfriend with a pet cat, and she threw a stuffed snake onto the floor, and I watched this cat grab hold of it and start ripping at it. And I said, there you go. That's the Eye of Ra attacking the evil serpent. So the Egyptians probably saw that, and saw in even their beloved house cats the same dynamic at work, and so that's probably why it works so well. But since we're in the realm of conjecture, an exhibit that I went to many years ago by this point had a statue of Sekhmet, but if you look at it, and I'll put a picture here, if you look at her, yes, that's supposed to be a lioness, but her features, they look a little more like a house cat's, don't they? So it may have just been more about artistic representation and not so much about the Egyptians really, drawing an arbitrary distinction between lioness goddess, cat goddess. That's what people today do. And that's the problem that I have with this book, is that saying, I want to look for cat goddesses. I'm all about the cats. That's not how the ancient Egyptians rolled. So that's not really very reflective. And by the way, you're just shotgunning a whole bunch of facts at me while you're talking about cats, and I'm about to go crazy. So ultimately, this is what happens when you do research with a preconceived outcome, a filter. You're looking for specific things to match what you're already thinking, and in the process you miss other evidence that can sometimes support your argument, sometimes refute it. And in this case, her original intention was just to talk about cats. So I know I have some fellow Egyptian pagans that really like this book. I didn't. And if you're thinking about it, you know what? Give this book to the crazy cat lady in your life, because they'll probably enjoy it, and there'll be plenty of interesting things that they might come back and ask you about. But I'm going to look for some other books that are in my wish list that are specifically devotional literature for Sekhmet, and other goddesses, and that is something that I look forward to reviewing in the future, sometime next year. But in the meantime, this one is going on a shelf somewhere. So there you have it. A yay and a nay. Can't say I'm not balanced. There are other books that I'm going to be reviewing. One of them is Egyptian in nature. As a matter of fact, the next book that I'm going to review of a Kemetic nature is about us as Kemetics, and the modern revival of Egyptian religion. And I'm actually cited in the book, and a lot of other, notables in the Kemetic world are, and I'm really looking forward to talking about that book. Also, for next month, I have a book on Sumerian magic that I'm going to review for you, and talk a little bit about Sumerian ritual and, things like that. Sumerian recon, basically, because nobody really has anything on that. I say nobody. I've got some friends, and if you want to look up the Temple of Enki channel, it's all one word. So you're going to have to look for it and then field through a whole bunch of Anunnaki alien stuff. Oh my god. That's the problem that the Sumerian pagans run into. So we'll talk a little bit about that next month. In the meantime, I hope everyone here in the United States is having a good Thanksgiving season, and that everyone else is, having a peaceful pre-Christmas season. And I look forward to getting together with you again in just a short while. Remember, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit like, and be sure to check us out on Patreon. I've been sharing a lot of pictures and other videos, and of course outtakes go in there. And we've got Konsu's Coffee House. I'm working on some more installments of that for the exclusive tier. As we create more cool content, it will go on Patreon first, and you'll see it there as a sneak preview, and then here on YouTube. So, for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Serenity.
Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on lulu.com and shop for pagan supplies in my Etsy store. Check the description for links. And special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon.